Hey everyone, it's Jen with Spirited Saturdays, and today I am going to be talking about coping. I'm going to be talking about what it is to feel like you're deserving of knowing how to cope healthfully, why you deserve to learn those things instead of going to the eating disorder, what happens when you choose that path instead of the eating disorder. Okay, so just on a very basic level to start off, I'm just going to ask, how do you cope when things feel out of your control and you're trying not to use eating disordered behaviors to deal with that? How do you cope without using behaviors when you feel like your power has been taken away and you feel like you won't be okay until you get it back? I think what I've tried to do is shift perspective. That's how I begin to cope, shift perspective. If you feel like somebody took away your power, know that this feeling is being created. It's being created and it's being reinforced in your mind. And in reality, you have every right at every moment to change your perspective and in doing so, reclaim a power that was never lost to begin with. Maybe it feels like your power actually is being taken away. And the idea, I think, is to understand how your further validation of that is only reinforcing it. So at some point you would need to shift your perspective and understand that you do have your power and that it is accessible to you. How do you cope perhaps when you're in a transition or you feel like you're in limbo? Maybe there's something going on for you that's blocking you from moving forward in some aspect of your life and you're using your eating disorder to deal with that. All right, I have a whole set of thoughts on this, so if you just follow me through this, hopefully it'll make sense. And there's the cat. There's the key. Got it before I did. All right. Sorry. Okay, well, the thing is, just stay with me here. If you're using your eating disorder to survive, meaning if you're using it to cope, even though that's really backwards, you're not using it to live. But there's also something inside of you that might not want to die either. So you're allowing yourself this vague kind of elusive option or possibility of a life later on. And by staying in the eating disorder because it's a means of survival, there is a part of you that wants to survive, and by extension, there's a part of you that knows that you can actually live. And maybe you can't see that. Maybe you can't realize that or access that part of you now. But it's there, and it may be dormant. It may be latent inside of you. It may be asleep. Because you know that if you survive, so you're giving yourself an option of living, and so there's a part of you that isn't ruling that out completely. And so, okay, so because there's this latent part of you that might see a life after this, let's take it a step further, and by extension of that, you might see how in that life, when you get there, you're going to have to deal with all of the things you're avoiding now because you're in your eating disorder, because you're using your eating disorder. So in that far off, vaguely projected, pondered, possible life, you're still in that life. That life contains dealing. And right now you're not dealing. And all of these issues are just forming residue, and you're going to have to deal with them later. And so why not? Oh, sorry. So the eating disorder lets you avoid those things. And when you recover from it or from any addiction, you won't get to avoid them anymore. So my question is, why not start addressing them now? You don't necessarily have to address them with full steam right now. And you don't have to reprimand yourself either. You don't have to address these things begrudgingly. But the point is to face them and to face what comes up for you when you do. Address them in baby steps, and then you will learn that you can cope better than you thought you could. Because if you felt unable to cope, there was a reason for that. And it doesn't mean that you deserve to suffer with an eating disorder just because you feel unable to cope in another area of your life. There is a reason you feel unable to cope, and you are worth addressing it. Don't address it from a place of guilt or from a place of consequence. Address it because you wholly deserve to become the person that you are. And when you address it, you might find that coping is not as complicated as you thought. And it's not as exhausting as you thought. And it's not as draining as you thought. Not as dramatic as you thought. You will find your innate strengths when you face what you fear. And you cannot authentically discover and enact those strengths if you don't face what you fear. If you don't face secrets you've been keeping, because secrets can rot and turn to shame, then if you don't face those things, then you will not find those strengths. And in order to find those strengths, you have to come face to face with what you fear the most, or what you fear. And once you face it, you realize you don't need the eating disorder. You realize that you can serve the same purpose as your eating disorder and then some. You can provide your own replenishing source of survival, which will lead to life that you could see in a more positive light. You can cope with things that make you uncomfortable, fearful, ashamed, sad, angry, disappointed, without using your eating disorder. Once you address the things you have a hard time coping with, you can dissipate shame. You can let go of disappointment. You can re-empower yourself and get rid of the attachments and interpretations that you give to your feelings. Get rid of the judgments. You can let all of that go. When you address what you have difficulty coping with, all of a sudden the other people who are holding your puppet strings don't have a hold over you anymore, because you will see that it's coming from you. The interpretations of others' actions, or what you're willing to put up with from others, how you're willing to enable or be enabled what you by others, all of this can become clear to you without any judgment of yourself. You don't have to attach bad me to what you feel unable to cope with. You can get your power back when you realize it's not a power struggle. It's not a balance. It's not about balance of power. And so if someone is playing a role in your life that is allowing you to go on coping ineffectively, you can look at yourself and say, why am I allowing this person to have this effect on me? What do I need to do to proactively deal with this situation, deal with this dynamic without belittling myself, without belittling another, and without enabling or being enabled? You have the power to do that, and you don't have to be a victim. So when you feel unable to cope, remember that. Remember that you don't have to be a victim to your insecurities, to your history, to in your relationships, in your head. You don't have to be backed against a wall. You can take yourself away from the wall and remember you are important. Coping with life's struggles healthfully is worth the work. And you'll see that because when you do cope healthfully, you are stronger. You become stronger, and you can become who you are, which is a far more valuable deal than coping using the eating disorder and getting back more of the eating disorder and even less of yourself. So remember that. When you value who you are, when you address your fears, when you address what is keeping you from coping healthfully, you get a reward. You get more of you, more of your strengths, more of your greatness. You find out about more of your greatness. But every time you choose to let the eating disorder make that decision for you, you recede into it further and further from yourself. And you have to remember that you are in this world to serve a purpose. And maybe having an eating disorder is part of your life's journey, and maybe it's teaching you something, but the letting go of it will teach you more than being in it will. And when you let it go, you are free in every sense. You're free to feel happy, free to feel sad, free to do things you love, free to do things you have to do. And one of those things is addressing your difficulties with coping and learning not to judge yourself for that. And with these tools, you can build a future for yourself that the eating disorder has no place in. So that's my take on that whole thing, and I hope that helped. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.